Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm looking through a lot of the videos I've recorded, and there's a bunch of more, I would say, dramatic ones where I'm like, this is a problem. And you can tell. I think if you sat down, and no one in the right mind would do this, but you tracked the kind of the cadence of the videos, you can tell when I'm struggling with something. Like I'm struggling to get a business permit all reissued, or you can tell these moments where I'm going through some irritation in the business, and so then it shows up in the videos. I tend to be more annoyed, um, or if sales figures are showing one direction, and meanwhile on social media they're debating some ridiculous thing. It shows up in the topics. The solution to this is to try and get far enough ahead that I can kind of set a Monday this topic, Tuesday this topic, and I'm getting there. But I'm almost thinking like I take the month of June off, like no videos, and then we start up again. That could be something that I do. I don't know. We'll see. But this is a topic with a lot of nuance, and it is one I think that's important, and I think it's obvious, and I want to believe almost everyone agrees. But let's see. The basic premise that I've kind of hit on a few others. That's why I opened up the way I did. Is around breaking characters, because I think that no matter what, it's a fun, nice thing to say. Well, every story has its place, and every character can do anything and everything else. But characters are not interchangeable. And I saw this tweet by Eric Larson that I think is accurate. I agree wholeheartedly, saying like if you're drawing the Silver Surfer and you're putting in eyebrows and like facial hair and other things, then you're doing a lot of work to make the character not look like the Silver Surfer. And I think, okay, I agree with that. I think that's well illustrated, well said. I don't know if he had a bigger point in mind, or if it was just like, hey, sometimes there are things you can do that can make something appear not like it is. Now, you might come around. This happens all too often in comics, as somebody says, well, wait, hang on, what if Jim Lee wants to draw the Silver Surfer, and he wants to draw a Silver Surfer with like some, like the start of a mustache and eyebrows, and that's his style, and who are you to tell Jim Lee how to draw? And that's a tricky situation, because who would tell Jim Lee how to draw anything? I mean, he's an amazing artist, so you should just leave him alone, let him do his stuff. But at the same time, you kind of get the impression that the fact that Jim Lee is an amazing artist, he knows that you don't, the Silver Surfer, this kind of alien-looking creature that's designed to be silver and smooth and everything else, wouldn't have like big bushy eyebrows, because that would be ridiculous. So anyway, it kind of self-selects in that point. But there's another case that I think feels a little bit like this, and it's one that a lot of people complain about, and it's a character of Miss Marvel. Now, I know there's a lot of debate and disagreement, and people have argued about this, but I think that a lot of people have a recreationist view of history where it comes to Miss Marvel. We've talked about this before. When the character first launched, there were certainly a handful of people who I would call assholes, who were like, "We don't need Muslim superheroes. How dare you know?" And they got really really anxious about that. But there weren't many. There was a pretty small group of people. It's kind of the same myth that gets tossed out around and then all the trolls showed up to say a black man can't be Captain America when they put the Falcon in the Captain America suit. But the reality is very few people were complaining. And, because when that moment happened, which, again, I don't know very many people could recreate the history. Rick Remender had been building to it for a little bit of time. He puts the Falcon in the suit. Marvel then almost immediately screws it all up by the event that happened almost immediately, like within months, was Axis, where they flipped the heroes. And there was some really clunky writing, which I've talked about before, at the start of Axis, where the Falcon, who is now Captain America and weirdly the leader of the team, like he was new to the Avengers, but they made him leader because he's Captain America now, so I guess he's a leader. It was just it didn't make a lot of sense, and the Falcon is acting, meaning they're writing him in a way that makes no sense to the Falcon. It wasn't how Sam Wilson sounds. It did just completely different. And it was disappointing because Remender was writing that bit of the run, and it was completely different from what Remender had done literally 2 months earlier in setting up the character. But the first major arc that Sam Wilson got as Captain America was to be a fascist who was kind of brainwashed as part of Axis, his personality inverted. And then they went into Nick Spencer did a bunch of very kind of weird things, and it was not a good run for Falcon. I feel bad because I was enjoying this idea that Sam Wilson gets to be Captain America. I thought that was a cool pitch. They'd kind of hinted around at this since the early '80s. So this was some good payoff. Like 40 years later, we're getting to it. It made sense. So I remember being kind of pissed off that they felt like they wrecked it. But Miss Marvel is it's a quicker one. It's an easy one for people to wrap their head around. When that character debuted, the premise of the character was that she came out of the Infinity series of Jonathan Hickman's, where the Terrigen gas gets released and a bunch of new Inhumans are born. And so, she goes up to her bedroom and she's in a cocoon, and then suddenly she's an Inhuman, Miss Marvel. Something that is never mentioned today. Like they said, they have distanced themselves from that entire event and everything else so far. It's not even funny. Like they don't get into she's an Inhuman. They're just like we're moving on. The series was G. Willow Wilson took a lot of pains to make the comic it was extremely reminiscent of early Spider-Man. The character of Kamala Khan was, bright-eyed. She's hiding her identity from her parents who wouldn't understand. And she was like a fangirl, and she's like, oh my God, she's messing up. And it was all very much what would happen if a teenage girl in high school got superhero powers. This is what it would look like. And that's how the story was written. And it was charming. It wasn't for everyone. I know a lot of people who might pick up the book and they want to see Frank Miller's version of Daredevil. It's not a good crossover audience. This was a story about learning to be a hero. It was almost YA. That was it wasn't quite, but it had that feel to it. It was a comic that I remember recommending for younger audiences of like, hey, here's something you could see, and it was charming. That was the character they established with Kamala Khan, and it worked. And then time went by and they relaunched the series because as they do, thanks to Secret Wars, which was a mistake because a lot of new readers who came into it didn't know what was going on. But even that wasn't a huge issue. It certainly took a bit of a readership hit, but not terribly. And then there's an event which, in fairness, I have argued is not a big deal. And from one perspective, it isn't. And this was a storyline where briefly Captain Marvel convinced Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, to help run this prison for predictive crimes. So she had found another Inhuman who could kind of see crimes before they happened, and so they built this prison to kind of imprison people who were going to commit crimes in the future. And obviously a huge human rights violation, it's wrong, and all those things. And it was just wrong. And there's some reviews done of this moment by some of the bigger YouTubers, and they made it out to be a very big deal. And in one sense, it wasn't. It was really two comics, and they didn't even go a full single comic with Kamala Khan being like, this is a good idea. She was like, she was uncomfortable with the whole thing. She was doing it because she looked up to Captain Marvel, but she was like, this seems like a bad idea. Like pretty much right from the start. So a lot of these reviewers made it sound like, Kamala Khan was the new Hitler, and they really blew it up. However, and this is a big however, it was not a big deal from a storyline perspective, from very few comics, very, very few pages were written about this. But it was a big deal in how it broke the character, because it did. It broke the character in a very unusual way. It took away the charm of the book. The charm of the book, and what brought a lot of people to it, was this idea of this new kind of wet behind the ears kind of superhero who wasn't capable of a bunch of big heroics, who was trying to find her way, who was learning what heroism means, who was struggling with secret identity and all that. And suddenly it thrust that character into situations of predictive justice and illegal imprisonment and running Guantanamo Bay, a like facility on American soil, and severely crippling her friend, and what it means to look up to an idol who leads you down the wrong path for the wrong, for maybe right reasons, but completely for the wrong reasons too. I mean, just it inserted a bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense. And it would be a little bit like if you're playing along with Kamala Khan. She's a new hero, and she just fun little hero trying to figure out what it means to be a hero. And then she accidentally murders somebody, and the family is blames her, and they can't live without their son. So the family of the kid she murdered commits suicide, and she's got all this blood on her hands. Like that, you should never do a story like that, because it completely destroys the original premise. And so it's weird and maybe tragic that this storyline, this stupid Civil War II storyline around the prisons, it's such a small, insignificant part of the character's history. It does not matter, and yet it dented the character. It dented the character in a pretty major way. And it's it comes up every now and then. I've seen some other comic writers who see this complaint say, "Hey, just don't pay attention to that storyline. Like, why are you even paying attention to this storyline?" And on one hand, I get it. Hey, just it wasn't a big deal. Why don't you just ignore it? Sure. But on the other hand, like, you can't. There are things done to characters that when you float them out, they damage the character. And where I think my opinion on this turned a little bit, because I'll admit I was of the, yeah, this isn't a big deal. Like, why are people harping on this? It was like one storyline out of 50. Like, it's not a big deal. Was it a good storyline? No, it was a terrible storyline. But it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. That was my point of view. And then what kind of changed my mind was, a cousin of mine is reading Miss Marvel for the first time, catching up about, because she always reads this stuff before the shows come out, and she's older. She's in her 30s, and she knew that Disney Plus is going to do a series, so she bought some of the trades, and she's catching up on Miss Marvel. Cool. And here's a reader who is not on Twitter, not paying attention to any of this stuff, not watching YouTube videos, not completely absent all the other commentary. And her comment was like, "Yeah, I kind of lost it. I lost interest after the superhero prison thing." I'm like, "Really? Why?" I'm immediately like, I'm on alert, or no, I'm just, my ears perk up, because it's like, this is this infinite storyline that I've been saying doesn't matter. And it's like, yeah, it just wasn't the same character anymore. And there you have it. It wasn't. And so while I think some people could just kind of compartmentalize and forget about this stuff, for others, and here's somebody who, again, she's reading these stories from the perspective of, I want to know what's going on before I see the movie. So this is not what I would call a huge comic fan. This is a MCU fan. And very different personality from, I'm guessing, 99% of the people who watch this channel. And they hit this moment, and it was an immediate turnoff. It was an immediate turnoff because it broke the character. It's like, this character is designed to be kind of happy-go-lucky, or not happy-go-lucky, but just kind of, learning what it takes to be a superhero. And now she's running a prison, and it's broken. It's wrong. And I think that is why I harp on this topic. That's a little bit why, you have an editor, or in theory, some management that's going to keep you from doing it. But it's just interesting to me that you can have these moments that no matter what else you do, it derails the character. Now, it doesn't mean the character's ruined forever. You just like, okay, pack it in, we're done with Miss Marvel. No, you've got to find a way to write your way out of it. And I think there are some ways. Like if Saladin Ahmed, he's not writing the series anymore, but one of the contributions he could have made to this is like figure out a way to get rid of that storyline, figure out a way to somehow come back from it, have her, you gotta figure out a way to repair, because it's now out there as part of the character's canon, and you can't just ignore it. So how do you move past it? And I think the solution in a lot of cases to comics is they hit these moments, it breaks the character, and they go, Well, we'll just kind of pretend that never happened. And sometimes they're successful, but most of the time they're not. Or it takes a very long time. To be honest, took a very long time for Carol Captain Marvel to move past the she gave birth to her boyfriend storyline from Avengers 200, which was a very weird storyline. Chris Claremont came along later and tried to repair some of it, but it took a long time to get to the point where that doesn't matter anymore. And honestly, I think most people just don't remember that issue existed. That's how they've been able to move past it. Miss Marvel doesn't have 20 years to get past this. Now, what will help is they'll do the Disney Plus series. It's obviously going to take from the original storyline. Now, with the announcement from Disney, we're going to get the Marvels or whatever. Captain Marvel 2 is going to be called the Marvels, and it looks like it's going to have Carol and Miss Marvel and Monica Rambeau kind of all in one movie doing stuff together. And okay, cool. But they're definitely going the fangirl, eyes of a new generation Miss Marvel. That's smart. They absolutely should do that, and then that will help. They can kind of put that movie out there. But I don't love an answer that is, hey, maybe this movie will cause people to forget the comics existed. That sounds like a terrible outcome. But here's where we are. Anyway, what about you? These are fun things to talk about. So for me, anyway. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.